It's Monday, the 30th of September 2024. Welcome to the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed, where we give you the top 5 business stories you need to know in just 5 minutes. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, 5 big stories to get through in 5 minutes, so let's get cracking with story number 1. Resource stocks are surging on the back of last week's stimulus from Beijing, with BHP once again the big Australian taking the top spot on the ASX 200 from the Commonwealth Bank.
It's been an incredible turnaround in just 5 days. It started with Beijing promising lower interest rates and other stimuli to help the struggling economy. That triggered a surge in commodity prices. Iron ore prices topped $100 a tonne mark in Singapore. That sent the share prices of the big miners higher. For the full week, BHP closed up 13%, Rio up 15%, and Fortescue Metals jumped 17%. The Aussie dollar is a commodity currency, and so higher commodity prices, particularly iron ore and coal, pushes up the currency. It finished the week above 69 US cents, about 7% below its previous low. The rotation to miners out of banks has been stark. Commonwealth Bank down 7% last week, NAB 6%, Westpac 5%, ANZ 4%. In fact, the rotation has been so sharp that on Friday, BHP regained the mantle of biggest company on the ASX, worth $227 billion. Commonwealth Bank comes in at number 2, $225 billion. Rio and Fortescue are now 10 and 11, having pushed down Woodside and Telstra.
Sean, the big question here is, will this rotation out of banks into miners last? Is it going to stick around?
Well, it depends a bit on whether you think what Beijing is doing will last. It also depends what you think about interest rates. In Australia, no doubt the banks are very expensive on a historical basis. There's more value in some commodity stocks. AMP chief economist Shane Oliver says the risk of another correction in shares remains high. Basically stretched valuations, optimistic investor sentiment, still a high risk of recession. There's also got the US election coming on. The flip side, global inflation is falling. Central banks are cutting interest rates. About 50% of global central banks have now cut rates. China is doing much more. Dr. Oliver generally says that there is a short-term risk, but the 6 to 12-month horizon is pretty good.
All right, on to story number 2 now, Sean. It was grand final weekend in Melbourne, and that severely reduced the number of home auctions over the past week. Having said that, the preliminary clearance rate across the nation tumbled to 64.5%.
It was the lowest since December last year, and the final clearance rate for the previous week came in at 60.7%. It was also the lowest in 2024, according to CoreLogic. 1,200 homes went under the hammer in Sydney. Its clearance rate went from 70.3% to 66.1%. There are only 237 auctions in Melbourne. The preliminary clearance rate was 56.7%. Adelaide came in at 75%. Brisbane 55%. ACT just under 66%. It's probably reasonable to ignore the weekend's figures, given all the football finals going on. But the number in Sydney particularly was really, really weak. It just feels that the housing market is cooling quite a bit.
Yeah. Now, story number 3, the numbers in this one are quite staggering. The biggest super funds are getting even bigger, with Australian Super and Australian Retirement Trust now accounting for more than half of all new retirement savings and more than $655 billion in assets.
Yeah, the next 5 largest, UniSuper, Hostplus, Cbus, Rest and Hester, manage $700 billion. So it's not far between the top 2 and the next 5, and the gap between the top 2 and the rest is growing. The growth in the 2 mega funds is not necessarily a good thing because it could trigger governance issues. Also, harder for them to find places to put the money, according to analysts at Morningstar. Aussie Super now manages $341 billion in retirement savings. Australian Retirement Trust, $314 billion, according to the Fin Review. Next is Aware Super on $180 billion. Also, about 37% of the inflows in the 12 months to the end of June went to Aussie Super. Australian Retirement Trust was about 15%, so they're getting about half the inflows as well, just getting bigger and bigger.
Indeed. Story number 4, the Financial Review's annual list of the 10 most powerful business leaders has been released. Topping the list is Commonwealth Bank boss Matt Comyn.
Yeah, Matt Comyn's done a great job deflating the anger around banks and has increasingly grown his brief, speaking out on everything from intergenerational inequality and artificial intelligence to housing and tax policy. Number 2 on the list is Mark Delaney, Chief Investment Officer of Aussie Super. Think that previous story we were just talking about. Not much happens on the ASX without Aussie Super knowing about it. Next is BHP CEO Mike Henry, then Super Fund Hester Chief Executive Debbie Blakey, followed by Gina Reinhardt and Andrew Forrest.
Last one, story number 5. The first new kind of treatment for schizophrenia patients in decades has just been approved by the US Food and Drug Administration.
The new class of treatments could help stabilise patients' symptoms without the uncomfortable side effects that accompany existing antipsychotics. The new drug, called Cobenfy, works differently from the class of drugs used by many to treat schizophrenia, according to the Wall Street Journal. The Bristol-Myers Squibb drug works by mobilising a new target in the brain. Traditional antipsychotic drugs have side effects including weight gain, falling asleep, involuntary muscle jerking. The new drug isn't without its own side effects. Nausea, vomiting, constipation were reported in clinical trials. However, it is the first major step forward in several decades.
All right, there we go. The top 5 business stories in 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Monday, the 30th of September, 2024. Remember to hit follow on the podcast. And if 5 minutes isn't enough, you can find our longer daily show called Fear and Greed, wherever you listen to podcasts. And that comes with a bunch of interviews and things as well. Today's interview is a terrific one for investors. Don't miss it. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was the Fast 5 Business News by Fear and Greed. Have a great day.